Fox News alert, he says the era of economic surrender is over. President Trump just wrapping up a speech on tax reform as he tries to sell his party's newly released plan. He says will boost the middle class and help America's businesses be more competitive. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, Abby Huntsman, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov is here, and today's #OneLuckyGuy from the great state of Wisconsin, Congressman Sean Duffy is here.
He is shout out than that.
And we're happy to have you back, Congressman.
It's good to be back with you guys, the best-looking ladies in daytime television.
All right.
Wow. Okay, so Rachel Campos Duffy just texted. I'm kidding.
Oh, she did, because she doesn't respond to mine.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
All right, President Trump giving another big speech on tax as he continues to try to build momentum for what could be his signature legislation. Wednesday's speech was about individual tax rates. Today, it's about tax relief for America's businesses, vowing the biggest tax breaks not seen in nearly a century. And while the president is signaling he's willing to work with Democrats on bringing tax relief to businesses, his top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, leaving little wriggle room. Watch.
Our opening offer and our final offer are on the table. We were happy to start at 25, and we're happy to go lower, and we're happy to start at 20 on corporates and go lower. So there's our opening offer. If he wants to counter something lower, we're very negotiable.
So the he Gary Cohn is referring to is Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, while the New York Democrat says his party is willing to work with Republicans on giving small businesses a break. Schumer panning the Republicans' proposal, calling it wealth-fare. All right, so we're going to open up to you, Congressman, because the big question at this point is your party selling this blueprint?
We're just at the starting phase. I can tell you what, so the president's just getting his sea legs on tax reform. He didn't really understand health care as well as he understands taxes. He gets this. He understands it. He's a businessman. I think he's going to sell this really well to the American people. We'll be able to follow suit. And he's hoping to bring Democrats on board. And I think they understand the policy of how important tax reform is.
Did he make any progress with that speech we just listened to?
It's a little dry for Donald Trump. I mean, he's not as good when he's on the prompter. But when he takes a prompter away and starts talking from his heart and passionately about taxes, that's a winner. But I think Democrats, if they see that we sell this well to the American people, they're going to put their finger in the air, feel the wind, and go, we better get on board.
He knows taxes and he knows the economy, Jessica. He spent a lot of time touting the progress that we've seen in the economy, talking about unemployment at a 16-year low, wages rising. He said the stock market is soaring to record levels, as it is today. GDP growth, he cited, hitting over 3% last quarter. He knows that well, and he's able to sell that. Can he sell taxes?
It's really complicated. I mean, we still need more details on this plan. And you mentioned Gary Cohn coming out yesterday and talking about it. I thought he did a really terrible job in it, especially wavering on the point about the middle class, saying, well, there's always a unique case, right, where maybe they won't end up better off out of this. I mean, Donald Trump campaigned on, I'm going to help the lower and middle classes. I'm not going to help myself. But by getting rid of the estate tax, the alternative minimum tax, which cost him $31 million in 2005, that's not a seller. Why isn't he lowering payroll taxes for the poor? Why isn't he upping the earned income tax credit? These are things that would get more Democrats on board. But to your point about Democrats having to look at where the country's going on this, a Heidi Heitkamp, yeah. She's got to do this, and she's got to see what's up. Claire McCaskill, Joe Manchin. I mean, we have 10 red state senators, Democrat red state senators, who are up for re-election. And we've got to get them back in office so that we can make some progress with an agenda that actually helps the lower and middle classes.
You know,
that's our agenda.
I call it the Manchin rule. Actually, if you want to get Democrat support and you don't have Joe Manchin on your side, he is a Democrat in a very conservative state now, West Virginia, that President Trump won handedly. If you can't get Joe Manchin on your team, you're not going to get it passed, at least on a bipartisan basis. You mentioned the messaging and President Trump, and you can tell he is so much more passionate and energized when he talks about tax reform and how important it is to him and the country in making us more competitive again. And talking about that forgotten man, talking about the farmers out there that can't keep their business going, that can't continue living on their land. That is what really connects with the American people, and I think what connects with members of Congress. You were saying this, you said if the president can sell this plan, then it will get passed.
That's right.
So how many Democrats do you think you really need? Because, I think the American public's looking at finances. Financial conservatism is part of the platform.
We don't need any. We're
right? You really don't. You shouldn't.
Now, would we like them to come aboard? Absolutely.
Well, there are a lot of things you like, but you can get this done with Republicans, right?
Absolutely. Just Republicans. Well, we could have done
even in the Senate.
Healthcare with just Republicans, but we didn't get it done. But can I make one last point to what you were saying? You can't underestimate the point that we're going to take away. It was said this is a 70,000-page tax code.
Yep.
We're doing away with the loophole in the preferences that the wealthiest Americans take advantage of. So when you say all these great things in the code, they're losing the preferences and deductions that only work for them. So this, Donald Trump was specific. This is not going to be a tax break for wealthy Americans. All the money, all the revenue is going to go to middle income.
But the analyses say that that's not the case. And what Gary Cohn even said yesterday in that interview, which we were all nodding along, was not his finest moment. He acknowledged that the middle class may come off worse after this. That's what I don't understand. There is no way Donald Trump is not going to benefit.
He said he could find one maybe that might be not better off, but he said by and far.
I think it's more than one. And we're going to get more analysis on this.
But the devil will be in the details. We simply just don't have.
Well, in the president's words, he's going to cut taxes for everyday hardworking Americans, and we're going to cut them substantially. All right, the fight for health care reform. Moving on, it is not dead, according to President Trump. He says he's willing to work with Democrats to come up with a bipartisan deal. But are they willing to work with him? And hundreds of illegal immigrants, many with criminal convictions, rounded up in a major crackdown on sanctuary cities this week. Is the Trump administration sending a message that's going to stick, or will certain cities keep defying the federal government by protecting illegals? Healthcare reform still alive and kicking as the president says Republicans are not giving up. Also telling Pete Hegseth he's willing to reach across the aisle on the issue. Watch.
We do have the votes for health care, but the filibuster, if you look at what's going on with respect to timing, we have only until Friday for reconciliation. So we're going into next year. But in the meantime, I'm going to start negotiating with Democrats, and we'll see what happens. I have a nice relationship with them. It's not really trust. It's if we can do a great health care bill, bipartisan, I'm okay with that. I'll negotiate with the Democrats. If we can come up with a fantastic health care bill, that's okay with me.
Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced the senators from both parties who were working on a bipartisan deal to shore up Obamacare markets are getting close to a compromise.
They both inform me that they're on the verge of an agreement, a bipartisan health care agreement to stabilize markets and lower premiums.
And a new Fox News poll suggests lawmakers should keep at it as a majority of Americans, 63%, want to see changes to Obamacare. You heard the president's words, Congressman. Can they get this done?
So first of all, that is a head scratcher for me on the Republicans and Democrats working together on health care, or the Republicans have the votes for it. The bottom line is Democrats want to lock in Obamacare, or they want to bring us to a single-payer system. A third of Senate Democrats have signed on to Bernie Sanders' care, which is single-payer. 60% of House Democrats have signed on to single-payer. So to think that you can find a compromise that brings you closer to a free market, taking power out of Washington and sending it back to people, or at least to states, I don't think Democrats can buy into that vision. So how Donald Trump cuts a deal with them is hard.
Concerns you?
So I heard it a little differently from you. I didn't hear that the president was expecting Democrats and Republicans to work together. I heard him say, I'm going to do a deal with Democrats. And we know that he will. And we also know that the threshold vote will be 60 votes, and that Democrats now may feel like they have a little bit of leverage. So maybe they will jump into the game. But you're right, we're not going to get to single payer. But did you hear what the president said? He said, I have great relationships with Democrats. And then he said, not really trust. Right? Did you catch it? It was quick. Not really. He knows that he's going to have to bring to bear that same type of deal, I would imagine, that he did previously with Democrats. And if Republicans want to be in the game, they, to me, are going to have to be the ones that are going to have to step into the fold.
Well, I think if the president actually moves on DACA and doesn't secure the border, and then he cuts a deal that shores up or Obamacare or brings us closer to a single payer, he's going to lose his base. So he can't necessarily do that. But the reality that we have right now is Obamacare is collapsing on itself.
Yeah.
And if we don't act, a lot of people are going to get hurt. So trying to navigate some neutrality moving forward until we can find, whether we're going to go to free markets or to single payer, that's going to have to happen.
What do you think about the executive order, though, to try to get the negotiation across state lines for insurers? I mean, that's something Republicans have talked about for 7 years.
Yeah, and a few Democrats have talked about it as well, actually, more of the Manchin type, who actually then kind of gave the go-ahead that we should be having a conversation about single payer. So that's something that it should be worrying for Republicans in this compromise era, that you even have Joe Manchin saying, I want to talk about it. But to your points about what the president was saying, I think it is important that he said it wasn't trust. It's business. And that's what he does.
Exactly. It's
no one trusts him, and he doesn't trust anyone. And that's how he's been doing deals all his life. He knows that Democrats will show up for things if they're going to get something out of it, like on DACA, like on the debt ceiling. I think he has a better relationship, frankly, with Chuck Schumer, who he's known for decades and he's more comfortable with than a Mitch McConnell. And I think that he should start talking up Patty Murray, who's working with Lamar Alexander on this bipartisan bill. Patty Murray is someone who worked with Paul Ryan. She is a complete moderate in that way. She knows money, she knows taxes, she knows health care. So he should go out there and maybe invite her for an event like he did with Heidi Heitkamp and say that
Air Force One.
Maybe she'd like a ride on the plane. Absolutely.
Also, where's the base going to go? Because I've heard this from a number of Republicans. If he does work with Democrats, he's going to lose that base. But when I travel the country and I talk to a lot of the Trump supporters, they're really angry with Republicans in Congress. So for them, if it's a matter of getting nothing done or working with whoever you can to get something done, because one of the biggest criticisms Republicans had about Obamacare was it was simply partisan. It was only Democrats. They didn't ask for any thoughts or input from Republican side. So is it hypocritical for Republicans now to say, you can't work with Democrats, we got to do this just ourselves?
They want to implement the Trump agenda, and if Trump abandons his own agenda, I think they'll turn on him.
All right. To be fair, real quickly, Democrats did open the discussion. They just didn't take any of those suggestions.
All right, we will leave it
But
there.
we listened like a little.
The Trump administration is successfully launching a series of operations targeting hundreds of illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities. Many convicted of violent crimes. Whether the efforts will make city leaders rethink their policies. Plus, the White House planning to consider a refugee's ability to assimilate and contribute to the United States when admitting them into the country, whether that is fair, and if we will see liberal outrage.
Well, we knew it would happen. The Trump administration is cracking down on sanctuary cities. ICE agents caught nearly 500 illegal immigrants in a series of targeted operations just this week designed to go after people that counties and cities are shielding through their non-cooperation policies. They arrested more than 100 people in Los Angeles and Philadelphia each, and many more in Baltimore, Denver, Boston, New York, and Portland. More than 300 of those arrested had criminal convictions, including rape, sexual assault of children, manslaughter, weapons and drug possession, and drug trafficking. As I come to you, Congressman, I want to remind everybody, and I take a lot of heat when I say it, they had already committed a crime. They were here illegally. Go.
And what frustrates me and many Americans is that you have these cities and municipalities actually protecting gang members, rapists, murderers from...
Do you think they know that there are these people? Or do you think there's somebody else? Do you think they suspect, that's not who these people are?
I do think they do know. And I think this is the crack in the sanctuary status that so many states have pushed. But I think it's important to note that even the federal government, ICE agents, still have a right to come in and round them up and send them out of our country. So
obviously,
if the city won't defend their population,
some people are strong. This is exactly what the president wanted. Others will say, well, are you going after a certain segment? When you look at that list of crimes, who among those people would you want to protect?
And so some say, well, are we going after DACA kids? President Trump made sure, no, we're not going after DACA kids. We're not going after the dreamers. We're actually going after the worst actors who have committed crimes that should be deported. And I think this plays well across Middle America and places where I come from. Americans love that President Trump is trying to defend them from these violent illegal
and keep his word.
Absolutely.
It was part of making America great again. I see you on your phone, and I know that list. That's a brutal list.
It is unbelievable. So some of these individuals arrested during this operation will face federal criminal prosecutions for illegal entry. You look at the list of I mean, it's unbelievable. Aggravated assault, burglary, rape, as you mentioned, robbery with a weapon, sexual assault, sexual offense. I mean, these are not minor crimes that they committed.
How is this political? I'd love to ask you that. Isn't this just common sense when we're talking about this? If someone commits a crime, they are not legally supposed to be in this country anyway. Why should they not be reported or booted out? Why has this now become more of a Democratic issue where they seem to be supporting these sanctuary cities? Can you help us understand that? Because I struggle to wrap my head around it.
When sanctuary cities came around, there were a number of Republicans who supported them. Rudy Giuliani was very proud to make New York City actually a sanctuary city. And the idea was that we have an illegal alien population. Everyone accepts that. Right now it's about 11 million. And we want them to be able to come out of the shadows to work with police chiefs. And police chiefs around the country have actually said that they are supportive of these policies. But those 488 people, I think, that just got booted out and are on that crime list, I'm not going to miss them. No one's going to miss them. I think what the issue here is, and we've had this a number of times with President Trump, is a disconnect between the rhetoric that he has used and the inflammatory language that he has used about certain populations and then actual policy. Jeff Sessions has also said that they were going to round up people who they suspected were in gangs, for instance. You need hard evidence to boot people out. And I would say, I mentioned this to you in the break, there's a new Fox News poll that says 83% of Americans support legalization for the population that's here.
But this is not about President Trump here, right?
But it is about President Trump.
Many in your party have said that by rounding up these rabid criminals, that's going to create distrust in the community. Frankly, if we round up these folks who have committed these crimes and export them, that does create trust in the community. And if you're someone who says, listen, I've been abused, my child was a victim of sexual assault, and they report it, and that person doesn't get prosecuted or at least deported from the country, what does that tell every victim in every one of those communities? If I report it, this person is coming right back into my community. That's a travesty. The fact that Kate
Steinle's murderer was in this country five times before.
But
that's fine, but we have to be
protecting somebody who had been deported several times and should not have been in this country.
Absolutely, that was a mistake, and I think Democrats need to own those mistakes and make the broader point.
But it's not just Kate Steinle. I can tell you, I've talked to more parents that have lost children because of this, because people have not been deported after committing crimes. It is heartbreaking to hear those stories and lives that should not have been taken away from these families and from these people.
That's a reality.
But we do have to move on, because meanwhile, the Trump administration now planning to assess refugees' ability to assimilate and contribute to the U.S. in addition to their need for protection when deciding whether to admit them into this country. Well, the annual report sent to Congress does not say assimilation will be a primary factor, but the consideration alone marks a major policy change. And this coming on the heels of the White House slashing the number of refugees the U.S. will take in the next year by more than half. That is the lowest level since the law was enacted in 1980. So this idea, Congressman, that of course we want anyone who comes here to want to be here, to want to be proud to be an American. That is a no-brainer. That, again, is common sense. But how do you assess someone's ability to assimilate? Do you say, do you want to be here? And they say, well, yeah. You just take them for their word?
It's a great talking point. That's a great question. I don't know how you can assess anyone's heart of whether you want to really, truly be an American.
But we do ask that question.
But I don't know how you can look into their heart and actually make a determination. I think we see what's happening in Europe, and we see these pockets of communities that have come in as refugees and they don't want to assimilate into the cultures in the countries and the communities to which they've come. We don't want that to happen in America. We're a melting pot. But how you get to the root of that question, Abby, I don't know.
Because I've talked to a number of experts, Harris, on Fox and Friends, whenever these terror attacks happen in Europe most recently, and they say that what terrorists are trained to do is assimilate into that culture wherever they are, and to make people believe that they want to be there, they want to be part of their culture, and they trick them, and then they go out. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's going on here all the time, but it does complicate it.
It's part of the exam that people take, though, to gain citizenship in general. And I've seen that paperwork. I did some reporting on this last year, that, you know, those questions, you're right. You ask the question, you get the person on the record having answered the question, and if they lie, you should deport them. I don't know how our follow-up is on that, because I understand that paperwork isn't even input into the computers yet. It's only 2017. But, you know, with regard to whether we're looking for people among the refugees who might be terrorists, or just wanting to know who's in our country, extreme vetting benefits in both situations.
But it's difficult for me to think that they would be able to do this, assess their ability to assimilate and contribute to society, when the president is saying the reason why he's shrinking the number of refugees coming into this country is because we can't properly vet them. We don't have the resources.
Exactly. Why don't we fix all these problems? If we can crush ISIS, like the president has been doing, and we can send these countries back to peaceful areas, we're going to have less refugees coming into the country, and there's less need to actually vet
it's important.
Like
we will never, yes, I am all for crushing ISIS, whether it's President Obama at the helm or President Trump, anyone. That's a bipartisan issue. I'm glad we had that that moment. But what I would say is it's part of our history that we take refugees. Madeleine Albright was speaking out about this again. We need to remember what the Statue of Liberty. No, but we are lowering it to the lowest level that we've ever had at a time when we have crises all over the world. It's not just ISIS. We have what's going on in Syria. We have people who are now in Western Europe and in the Middle East who can't stay there permanently. We have kids growing up in camps who need to get out of there, who would benefit from our country, from our school system.
We're not saying we're not taking
No,
anybody.
I know, but what does it mean? It sounds like a scary potential to be...
Well, we're just basing it on the fact. And the fact is we're not stopping taking refugees.
The fact is we need details on how we rate assimilation and what that means for people. Well, it certainly shouldn't be that they can't have the right to practice their religion.
Yeah, and I also think both sides of the aisle agree that we need a better vetting process as well. So, all right, well, we will leave it there. But can Steve Bannon do it again? This plan to take the populist surge he whipped up in the Alabama primary runoff, the Republican incumbents on his target list, and whether establishment liberals are actually getting the message. More on that next.
Steve Bannon looking to take down the GOP establishment in a big way in 2018. The former top White House advisor scoring a big victory after supporting Judge Roy Moore, who won the Alabama Senate primary runoff this week. President Trump had put his support behind incumbent Luther Strange. Now Bannon looking to expand his anti-establishment playbook across the country, reportedly turning his attention to election fights in nearly a dozen other states, including bullseyes on Republican incumbents in Nevada, Arizona, and Mississippi. Meantime, Rush Limbaugh also appears to back taking down the establishment. The conservative radio talk show host telling Sean Hannity the Washington elites don't want President Trump to succeed. Watch.
They don't want Trump to succeed with his agenda. They can't afford that. I'm not exaggerating here. If an outsider with no prior political experience can come in and fix messes that people have been promised would be fixed for 30 years, how does that make them look? They can't allow that to happen.
All right, so we all watched Rush Limbaugh last night. What did you think of that?
I love Rush. He's wrong. I mean, I'm on the inside. I see we want to accomplish this agenda. This is why we run. We give our lives, we leave our families to accomplish this agenda. Now, you have a few senators who are not on board, and I think you're going to see the Bannons. Well, we all know those who didn't vote for health care. You can, I mean, John McCain is one. We have Alaska and Maine as well, Murkowski.
You think it was mainly a stick to Donald Trump?
But we're looking at Alabama, and Luther Strange was supported by the establishment, but also Donald Trump. So is Donald Trump now the establishment?
But did you see that article that it was Jared Kushner that pushed him into that, which I thought was really interesting, that apparently he was the little birdie in his ear saying you should back. Well, why? He listens to his son-in-law. It makes complete sense. Well, Jared Kushner hates Steve Bannon. He wants a more politics-as-usual approach.
Bannon came in after Trump supported Luther Strange. So Trump went first, and Bannon came in
but it's
after,
anti-establishment. I mean, Roy Moore was an anti-establishment type person. I mean, the comments that he's made about, homosexuality through his career, he's that kind of guy.
But I think the point is that Donald Trump supported Luther Strange first. Bannon came in after. So I think what's going to really happen, I mean, first of all, Senate races, they're really hard to influence. We pick our own senators, and we really don't care what other people think about the people who are running. And we saw that in Alabama. Looking forward, though, I do think that Republicans who are not on this agenda, on health care and tax, they have targets on their back, and they very well could lose in primaries. Watch out.
I mean, when you talk about what the options are out there for Republicans, it's going to get interesting if Bannon starts to run these insurgent candidates, as he says that he wants to, like with Judge Roy Moore. They are more in line with the president in the White House. Yep. So, candidates, as he says that he wants to, like with Judge Roy Moore, they are more in line with the president in the White House. Yep. So, there has been, I mean, the Jared Kushner thing is out there, but there's also been some reporting that perhaps the president might have struck a deal with McConnell, because Mitch McConnell had a horrible week last week, right? And so you're going to back that candidate by landing Air Force One. You're going to do that. But you heard the president say, if and when he loses, I'm with the other guy, too. I just want our side to win. And who's going to lose Alabama? Not the Republicans.
If you're on my team, I'll come and help you out. But I say this, Democrats have their own issues going on. Seth Moulton just came out, a Democrat congressman from Massachusetts, came out and says, we need new leadership. They have their own issues in the Democrat Party that we're going to see in these next elections.
Yeah, but Steve Bannon may be just what President Trump needs. When you said that he could risk losing his base if he works with Democrats, I actually disagree, Jessica. I think that Steve Bannon and President Trump have a strong relationship. and talked about this well before this happened. He said, you could be more powerful for the country and for me if you get out of the White House.
Oh, I think they have a great relationship. It's Bannon and Kushner that don't.
The highly anticipated return premiere of, wait for it, Will and Grace, turning into an all-out bash fest of President Trump and his voters. Has liberal Hollywood gone too far? That's next. Again?
No way.
All right, let's start. Karen, hand me that curtain swatch. I need to make sure it works with his coloring.